Hi guys, my name's Ian and I'm the head coach at Tri Club, and today I'm here with Andy Reed OBE, who is an absolute legend. He has been involved in local governance, he's been involved with the big boys in politics, he's now involved in business, and he's a big sportsman. So welcome, Andy.
Thanks, Ian. No pressure there then, bigging that up.
I'm sure you'll be more than fine with your experience, Andy. So how are you doing today? And I'd just like you to tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are and your journey up to now in sport, politics and business.
Yeah, unfortunately there's not a really short version of this, but I suppose if I sort of where am I now and then work backwards is probably sometimes the easiest. You can switch off when you get bored about how far back I go.
Brilliant.
But I suppose at the moment I'm sort of, I don't know how to describe this, but semi-retired. The idea I got to 55 and sort of retired. The last decade been running something called Saje Impact, which we'll talk about a little bit more, which has largely been a lifestyle business really, in which we just try and look after many of the things that I did when I was in politics. I was in Parliament from 1997 to 2010. I was a member of Parliament for Loughborough, so as you can imagine, we'll go into my sports background, but being a mad keen sports person and being allowed to talk about sports and politics as part of the day job was fantastic. And being involved in the university in the period when obviously with the elite sports provision that we brought there during that time has been fantastic, and still heavily involved at the university with startups and some of the departments and particularly around sport. So I suppose for me, who am I, what am I? I'm a mad passionate sports person who happened to combine my passions for sport and politics and life, particularly over this last decade, running the sort of company, working with big brands from Nike and the RFU, right down to really small charities, and now chairing something called the Sport for Development Coalition. So all of those hundreds, if not thousands of charities that use sport for developing individuals, and quite a lot of that, I know we're talking a lot today about mental health and we'll come on to that journey, but quite a lot of them are in that space, the mental health sort of work. So great place to be. Only been in that role for 3 months. I thought I'd retired, but I'm not very good, as you'll learn as we go through this, saying no when people ask me to do things. Always happy to try and take on a new challenge. It's both a weakness and a strength. Life wouldn't have been half as exciting if I'd said no to all the things. I give everything a go. So it's a unique combination, I suppose, of somebody who did a bit of local politics, ended up in Parliament, passionate about sport, able to combine those two things, and then the last decade turned that into a sort of business where I've been helping sports bodies and chaired a whole variety of different parts of the sector. Sport and Recreation Alliance, SIMSPA, the Chartered Institute for Management of Sports and Physical Activity. Now this coalition, chaired my local, what used to be called county sports partnerships, but now active partnerships, which again is part of something I did for governments and reviewing their future. So I suppose I try to describe to the kids that I sort of drink coffee for sport these days. I sort of hang around the sector, run this sports think tank to just try and get them to think a little bit more strategically, try and interact with people outside the sector and bring those skills and thoughts into sport and physical activity world. Just hang around, hopefully be a friend to the sector, but in a challenging sort of way, sort of just ask questions. Doing a couple of strategy sessions this week over Zoom and other pieces. So yeah, been an interesting life. I'm only 55, so I think I've got another decade or so of what's the next phase, and we might come on to that, but that's where I'm at the moment, post COVID 2019. What do I do? You know, is there a different way of serving? Because I think there will be some fundamental changes to the way that society runs, and some of the stuff, this is a very long answer, I know, but some of the stuff I would like to do more of is that we've seen in the figures of those people who are staying physically active that actually the inequalities that were there before have been amplified by this crisis. So urban areas, low socioeconomic groups, number of women participating is dropping. So all the things that we were making some slight progress in have been exposed by this. So I want to go a bit further back at the food chain, probably like I was in politics, to try and tackle some of the inequalities that exist that create some of these levels of physical activity, inactivity. So yeah, that's a brief where we're at the moment, and let's see where it goes.
What you've been doing there is unbelievable. Thank you so much for your contributions, both in Parliament and in sport. I've seen some of those, and you actually helped to name my own company as well, Tri Club. So I appreciate that. You helped me get started me on the website. So
well, it's one of those, as I said, saying yes to a cup of coffee and an idea, and I like to be an encouragement to people. You know, I've never had a plan in life. I've always sort of, oh, there's an opportunity. Let's see where that takes us. And so I try to encourage others to If they've got ideas, dreams, and things, be realistic. I know how to do a business plan and sort of work things through, but why? Take an opportunity. And it's been great to watch your growth and sort of be involved, and they'll keep bumping into each other and just catching up. And thanks to the world of social media, I know weekly what you're up to and where you're going, and some of the things and the clients and the people you're working with. So it's absolutely brilliant to be sort of part of that. I was going to be very modest and I don't claim to be a part of your journey, just a very small few cups of coffee and a few chats.
It's been really helpful, so thank you so much, Andy. I just want to ask you, alongside obviously all you do for work, how are you keeping fit and healthy during this time? What is it you do sport-wise?
So my biggest passion has been rugby. I discovered rugby at the age of 11, represented the county and played for the school in my school years. And then sadly, from my wife's point of view in particular, for the last 40 years, I've still played. I got to 55 beginning of last season, decided it probably was the time to sort of quit. So one of the things we've done in Parliament, we have a parliamentary rugby team. So we play charity games around the Six Nations and sometimes travel. So we have a Rugby World Cup as well. So I went to Japan for the Rugby World Cup last September. God, it feels like a different lifetime ago. And I decided that was the point in which I should probably play my final games and then sort of hang my boots up. But I still play touch rugby. There's a 3G pitch around the corner here where we live in Corn at the school every Wednesday night, 7:30 to 8:30. We just get a chance to run around with a rugby ball. I still think in my head I'm playing at Twickenham with all these teenagers and things, and I create the space and all the rest of it. I'm slightly addicted to it. As you probably know, one of my best pieces of equipment is my zone energy, my zone belt. So each week and each month, I know I need to hit the Chief Medical Officer's recommendations for physical activity. So I wear my MyZone belt when I'm actually doing physical stuff, and I'm in a group of other people, some really serious athletes across the country who, I probably do about what they call 2,000 of these MEPs, these MyZone energy points. But I'm in a group with people who are doing 10 or sort of 15,000 a month. They're super. I don't know how they find the time to do it all. So for me, it's about, I've lost that. So I tried to have to replace the sort of the social aspect of the rugby I quite enjoy, but it's also just the banter, with a team sport, it's the banter and the stuff that goes around it. So I'm really missing that. But fortunately, my rugby team have put together a challenge as well. So at the moment, we're on day 7 of a 7-day challenge where we've all been put into teams. We've got to try and do as many miles as we can each to like do a jailbreak from the rugby club to see which team gets the furthest away from Bristol. So after this session, our team's second from last at the moment, so I've got to go put some serious miles in on the bike just to make sure we don't come last out of the team. It's for a good reason though. One of our teammates is an NHS worker, and he's been in the hospitals all week. So actually, I think he's made more contribution than the rest of us. But it's things like that. So for me, at the moment, it's a bit of running. I'm not a long distance runner, as you know. I used to be a sprinter, and anything over 100 meters seems too far for me. So I've been struggling with that, but I'm really sort of pushing through. Did an 8K yesterday, got a bike in the garage, and I do some HIIT sessions. So basically, I just need to stay reasonably trim for somebody who is a constant nibbler. My undoing is the biscuits and the cakes around the house. I do really well if they're not around. Otherwise, I sort of just eat too much. And you'll realise this, even I know how fit and slim you are, but you get to an age in your 50s where it just won't come off. Every biscuit goes on. It doesn't matter how many calories you burn the other way, it just won't come off. So I'm just trying to fight maintaining a sort of a fighting weight at the moment. But I do love my physical activity. The endorphins, all the rest that you get from it. I'm still sort of addicted to doing something at least 5 times a week and trying to do a bit of variety. I haven't discovered cycling yet or golf. I didn't go, just waiting for me to. I know it's supposed to be middle-aged men in Lycra. Technically, I'm there, but I don't think I've quite succumbed to that. I just think if I give up the rugby, I've given up my youth. So I'm taking on. I think I've got another. I reckon I've got a few more years just to hang around with them.
Yeah, it always feels a bit weird when you pull on your first pair of bib shorts. You just have to feel uncomfortable and crack on anyway.
Yeah. Well, when I treated myself to a new pair of rugby boots to head out to Japan last year, that was Sarah was most distraught because I need to get about 3 or 4 years out of those. So I used to hate it every time I come back with a new pair of sort of boots over a summer. I think, you're going to play again, aren't you?
No, it's great, and it's great that you found an alternative as well to full contact rugby and touch rugby. Obviously, that and with everything else that you're doing, you are staying incredibly fit and well. So well done for that.
I think it's really important. I mean, you'll come on to this a little bit, but I do try to take quite a holistic approach to life. So there's a bit of this ikigai, going out to Japan last year, it was quite interesting doing that. But this piece, about our health and well-being, all being combined. So, I don't drink enough water. I know that. My diet's pretty good, but could do better. But, getting enough sleep and doing enough physical activity just gives you this whole that allows you the space and the time for other parts. There is a lot of evidence around physical well-being matching your mental well-being and other pieces.
Yeah.
So, I do get, if I've not done it, I get lethargic and I get a bit anxious that I do need. It's a slight addiction, I know, but there is a certain combination of trying to get this holistic sort of approach to life. And obviously, we share a faith, that other piece as well. You just sort of try to create this rounded individual that sort of matches all these challenges that come at us.
Yeah, it's very true. The physical definitely affects the mental. I find that as well with anxiety. Once I've been out on a run, I found that it's dissipated significantly, and I love the feeling afterwards. It definitely helps. So yeah, well done for keeping up your physical activity. So you've obviously had and have a very important role to play in how this country is governed, both in politics and sport. Would you mind talking about some of the initiatives you've helped bring about in the sector of sport during your time as MP? And whilst you're doing that, I'm just going to put my phone on charge. These are raw and real times, and my phone battery is running low, and I don't want to lose you. So whilst you're talking, it's going to switch over to you. I'm listening, but I'm also putting in my phone charger.
I'm sure it's the same for everybody else. Yeah, no. Yeah. I suppose I was very lucky in that when I was elected into Parliament, the combination of Loughborough and sport was important. I was individually put into the DCMS, the Department of Culture, Media and Sport ministerial team. So I found myself quite quickly after about sort of 12 months of being in Parliament as part of that ministerial team. I'm that old, it was the late 1990s, about 1998 through to 2001, I was in that team. So you're thinking about the rebuilding of Wembley, original sort of World Athletics. The Dome was a part of that. So it's one of the bits I teach on a civil service project leadership program these days, and they use quite a few projects from that period about how not to do project management. So it's quite interesting having gone through that. But then through my time, I mean, probably the biggie would have been the stuff around the Olympics. So there were a few of us who were interested in bidding for the Olympics. So even from about 2003 onwards, trying to convince the government to bid, to be then part of the bid process. And then for me, this is where the combination, I suppose, of the Loughborough and the Olympics came to its fore, in that trying to create, I then moved to the Treasury ministerial team working with Gordon. And clearly, once we won the Olympics, we also then needed to do really well in the Olympics. And there's a guy called Peter Keane, who now is based at Loughborough University, amongst other places, who worked with UK sports. The legend that is Sue Campbell, but basically came to us with these stats. He is a massive, great statistician and great thought leader. They demonstrated to us that actually, if we wanted to come forth in the medals table in London 2012 with so many medals, we're going to have to invest this much money into the sports system. So he came with a figure. He needed 100 million a year. We're already putting in 50 million, so we just need an extra 50 million, only 50 million a year until 2012. In grand terms, considering the games cost a few billion, this was a bit of a no-brainer. But I was the link between DCMS, UK Sport, and the Treasury officials, just trying to make this case. And just fortunately in a place when I was still in the Treasury team when Gordon announced in one of the budgets that we were increasing this funding. And just one of those moments I remember, as we used to have a little party, it was a chili and a curry at number 11 Downing Street after a budget statement, and Gordon walking in and just saying, will sport be happy now? Little those vignettes where you think, wow, it's 4 years hard work and it's in there. And then in 2012, I was out of Parliament by that stage. And as Seb Coe always says, the Olympics is full of the glorification of the inconsequential. So lots of people all claim to be crucial to the Olympics, and I don't want to be one of those. But there were just a few moments along the way where it was just nice to play a small part in just bringing that together. So I must admit, when we got to the end of the Olympics, and Peter had said in 2006 that we would get, if he gave him the money he wanted, he'd get us 65 medals in London. to be at the end of the Olympics in London 2012 and we had 65 medals was quite unnerving, really.
Yeah.
But he demonstrated that you could create a system. And I suppose that's where I've been lucky being involved in Loughborough, is that right from the beginning. So if you wander around the university now, from the swimming pool and the athletics, all of those facilities are all part of this concept of building a system that could create elite athletes. I suppose fast forwarding, it was just post my time in Parliament, but then I know we're particularly talking about mental health, but then when I was chair of the Sport and Recreation Alliance, I realised actually that stories started to emerge of bullying and mental health issues with elite athletes. And it was at that stage, about 2013, 14, that we launched the Mental Health Charter, because actually I realised, and I've been a big proponent of, the no compromise approach that we had to winning those medals has actually been detrimental. So, you hold your hands up sometimes, don't you? In 2006-7, didn't really realise, athletes seem to be pretty resilient, to get their focus to win medals. I've always been impressed, slightly scared by some of the athletes. They're so focused, it's unbelievable. But part of that was hiding this other issue. And so in a way, I've been quite happy to be leading the thing, to say, but really sorry, we didn't spot this 6, 7, 8 years ago. This clearly was an issue, but I think in general, we all talk about mental health in a much more open and honest way. And I'm quite happy to say I was one of those who didn't spot this coming. And that's why I want to do even more to highlight the issue, is that we should have all sort of seen some of these things. Dead easy in hindsight, but people would bottle it up or call it other things in the past, whereas now people are willing to talk about it. So yeah, I suppose the system, and then because it was Loughborough and Youth Sports Trust are based here as well. So as I've mentioned, the legend that is Sue Campbell, who was Chief Exec Chair of the Youth Sports Trust. I met her in 1995 with a couple of kit bags in the probably the Beckworth building on the campus. And then so the school sports partnerships and the whole thing we did around school sport, getting up to the 2-hour offer, was something I was quite close to as well. And then obviously doubling the money that was being invested into community sports. I quite like my professional sport. I'm not a big fan of football. I don't watch a lot of Premier. I don't watch any Premier football, if I'm being honest. It was great for Leicester City, so it's probably the year I did watch quite a bit. But actually my focus is very much on the sort of sub-elite level outside of professional sports. That's where I think, that's where there's 150,000 amateur sports clubs and 50 million people participating. That's where their experience is. So I spend most of my time concentrating on that. And hopefully over time, the active partnerships with sort of some stuff we did around the CASC schemes. There's something, community amateur sports clubs. So I managed to get a tax change in the law to allow amateur sports clubs to get tax reliefs. Again, introduce a 10-minute rule bill. So that's where I put a lot of my focus, lots of little touch points along the way where I just did what I could do. I happened to be in a privileged position to be able to influence ministers and the Treasury and Prime Ministers, and hopefully made a little bit of difference from the backbenches. And I left with a reputation of being sort of the backbench voice for sport. I'm quite happy with that. That was my area of expertise. And I still get people coming from Parliament just to ask for my help and advice, just combining those two very strange, different worlds. So it was great. Parliament's strange. I'm not a very good sports person, despite all I've told you. But we do run a whole series of sports teams as well. So I was sort of heavily involved in the parliamentary rugby team and travelled the world with that, but also with the football. Cricket, absolutely rubbish, but again, would try and play. Tennis, we used to have an annual sort of game at Wimbledon and sort of part of the tennis team. Again, absolutely rubbish. But so I had there was an upside to doing all of this sport as well, which is to score tries at Twickenham. The only thing is, I say I put the ball in the back of the net at Wembley. It wasn't actually during a game, but at least I can claim I put the ball in the back of the net. I've never scored at Wembley.
I mean that's incredible, isn't it? To have played at Twickenham, Wembley, and Wimbledon, that's a massive dream for a huge amount of people, and you've lived that. And you've also, you've served this country by helping us to get one of the, greatest events I've ever been to, which was the Olympics. So thank you so much for your service there, and also right through to your work in grassroots sport as well. You've done a huge amount for this country, and you should be really proud of yourself. So, thanks very much. And what I want to move on to now is, you've done a huge amount and you're doing a huge amount for sport, but what are you working on at the moment? You know, tell us a little bit more about Saje Impact and the other areas you're inputting into to do with people's physical and mental health.
Yeah, so really, Saje Impact has been through a bit of a journey over the last decade, just trying to help a lot of those sports bodies really to make the most of the opportunities. And so the government's emphasis has changed quite dramatically. So even probably post 2012, 2013, 14, a realisation that putting money into just national governing bodies and waiting for an increase in participation, and I'll be one of those who would join in some of the criticism of London 2012. Now, I wish I knew then what I know now in terms of driving participation and the idea that it would just inspire a generation. It's much more sophisticated than that. So one of the great things I've been able to do after is set up Saje Impact and the Sports Think Tank, and I've been made a visiting professor at Liverpool John Moores and a couple of other bits. So I've worked with academics that sort of being a bit more critical of the sector I love, and hopefully that's the role I've played over the last decade, is to be a sort of critical friend. And so even when I was chairing the Sport and Recreation Alliance, which is the umbrella body of the 300 odd national governing bodies that are in this country, what we did set up was something called Fit for the Future. So a lot of that was around trying to improve the governance of sport. It's very, in a good way, very amateur at club and community level, but actually these are sort of big, quite large businesses at the heart of them, and it just needed to professionalise the way sport was run. We were getting left behind by other sectors, and so there's been quite a large part of the last decade has been improving governance, improving our resilience, and just working with whoever wants to work with us to just think critically about how we're set up and how we run. So even yesterday I was doing a Zoom call with a national governing body around their strategy, and just going through the impacts of COVID-19 on where that will impact their next 3 to 4 years. And there's some really big fundamental questions that need to be answered. So I suppose being a relative free agent, it allows me to, I'd say it was a macro view. So there are lots of different organisations who look after different parts of our sector. So I suppose you've got the Sport and Recreation Alliance, looks after the sort of community end of national governing bodies and movement and dance. UK Active would be the gym and leisure sector. SIMSPA would be the professional development of the people, the 600,000 people who work in the sector. Sport England, UK Sport, specifically in their areas. And now this new thing, the Sport for Development Coalition, is seen as part of that umbrella body of the bodies that look after the different parts of the sector. So it's the one that I'm not that closely linked to, although I sort of keep an eye on, is I suppose the sport business side. So the Sport Industry Awards and some other pieces around that. There's a couple of organisations that speak on behalf of the sports industry sector, and that's quite large as well. So if you take a holistic view, I probably try to cover and keep a top cover view on about 90% of the sector and what's happening, and then just try to get them to work together. If you ask me what we do now and what I'm going to do going forward, is this work around collaborative leadership. I've spent too long in my time listening to parts of the sector battling sharp elbows to be the people who speak on behalf of the sector. And so part of my vision and mission is to try and get the sector to be much more collaborative. So even in this COVID period, there's a little bit of, doubling down and just looking after their part of the sector, whereas actually the response is much more complicated and sophisticated. Even as an individual user, I'm not tied to one NGB or to a gym, or I run on my own. I belong to a gym. I belong to a couple of NGB. My portfolio of sport and physical activity doesn't fit neatly into their little boxes. And so again, I think it's important that we, I love this concept that you had a sports membership, one membership, and it's like you were able to dip in and dip out of all the different parts of the sector. Anyway, that's a bigger thing to do. So that's how I see my role is demonstrating collaborative leadership and trying to get the sector to work much more closely together, because we ask government to be much more joined up in a way it works with the sector, but sometimes we don't demonstrate our unanimity of voice when we're lobbying government. As soon as the money or there's a difficulty, sometimes those tensions can sort of emerge. So just want to try and work with sports leaders to keep us all on the same page and sort of move us forwards together. So it's quite an interesting one. Going forwards, I think I mentioned before, been talking to some serial entrepreneurs and others who've been doing some work around how business needs to be different. So I also sit on what they call a local enterprise partnership. So I'm there as a private sector rep on our Leicestershire LEP, the Leicestershire Local Enterprise Partnership. I was always when I first started work, I worked in local government in economic development, and I've always felt, you fundamentally need to get the economy working for people before almost anything else. Sort of all those other pieces that come from that. Well-being comes from having secure work and paid employment and an environment in which we can survive. So I've always had economic development in my sort of portfolio of things. I'm deputy chair of that, and I'd like to do more of that coming forward. I mean, clearly we're going to hit a big recession this year, and people's well-being to again reverts around to sort of well-being. So if you ask me what the big focus is, it's combining these whole pieces, that holistic approach I talked about before. So I would call it, we're moving into the well-being space, and which bits we can help with that. So really we'll be around sort of economic well-being as well as physical and spiritual well-being. So we will help projects and other people. I sort of will have been retired by my 56th birthday. That is the idea, and so I will have time and choose which projects and sort of people to support sort of going forward. So it's a great place to be from my point of view, but also quite exciting because I think there's a lot to do, and that's like literally changing the world to changing something locally. I'm on the Loughborough Town Partnership sort of board. I'm not quite sure what's going to happen with that. Local industrial strategy, just influencing little pieces like that, but also still working at government level to try and make some big changes around the way that the economy works. So yeah, basically anything that catches my desk that I fancy getting involved with is now legitimate.
During these tough times, we need people like yourself to help others to work collaboratively. I think that is one of the keys to get through this time and to enable ourselves to have a good economic, physical and mental future. And just moving on to the mental health side of things, it's quite a personal thing for you, isn't it? Your wife, Sarah, has wrestled with a condition. Would you mind just talking about that and the impact it's had on her and how she's coping with COVID-19 and the impact it's had on you and the family as well?
Yeah, so Sarah has had ME probably when we were, just before I first got elected into Parliament in the mid-90s, had to give up work. Chronic, called a whole series of things in those days. What's been really interesting has been from an outside and watching what we tend to think of the magic of the medical world. In those days, it was called yuppie flu, chronic fatigue syndrome. There's all sorts of names attributed to this, but I mean, literally unable to physically operate as an individual, would be large parts of the day in bed, absolutely tired, doing minimal physical activity. And this was really frustrating because Sarah's a bit like me. We used to play tennis together, we're in the same volleyball club, loved her Zumba, but in those days, anything physical activity-wise was as engaged as I was. So this was quite devastating. Went through that period of about 3 or 4 years where that was quite bad and sort of made a recovery. But then about 5 or 6 years ago, had a sort of a relapse. And so for the last 5 years, it's been really quite tough. So that it's really hard to explain to people, and nobody's quite 100% sure how or what ME specifically is. There's more we can talk about there. But actually physical exertion can it's like a Duracell battery you can't charge above 10%, and anything you do takes your battery down to zero again. Yeah. And so it's actually quite debilitating. It's the worst bit is that because it's a physical and tiredness, we were always the first to leave anything. We just weren't able to operate normally, I suppose, at things you will have seen as a church sometimes to disappear. The noise of the singing would be enough to bring on sort of a relapse in the ME, so that we then could be shattered for 2 or 3 days where nothing's possible. So clearly, fast forwards to the COVID thing, one of the things there's a lot of evidence around is that probably ME is caused by the virus that attacks the body, and then the body has to react, and it sort of then prolongs for a time. So the last thing we needed, Sarah made a slight recovery over the last 2 or 3 months in particular, just before COVID. Wouldn't say she was operating normally, but starting to operate at about 70%. Last thing we really need is for Sarah to get COVID-19 and have a relapse back into sort of being stuck in and around the house. So in a funny sort of way, I think Sarah was saying that lockdown, she's been training for this for the last 2 to 3 years. There would be weeks where she would, not disappear, but from other people's lives, she'd be at home just trying to get through the day. So we've been here before. But also it's great because she's now got the family around her a little bit more. So, she's coping much better. But the reason it came up as an issue this week is that I've seen UK Active and other people in the sector have been putting out some statements from the Chief Medical Officer about physical activity always being good in every sort of condition or illness. And actually, one of the big things that Sarah in particular has been leading on as part of our work at Saje is working with the ME charities to highlight the problems with what they call graded exercise therapy. So there are some people who think that ME might be psychological rather than a physical illness, and they've been trying to basically say you need to get off your backside and exercise because that will sort it out. Whereas actually, there's lots of evidence that's the worst thing you can do. In fact, it's made people much worse. As you can imagine, if you were really ill with a condition, you can make it worse. So that's reared its head. So Sarah had made herself probably really quite poorly working with these charities doing this sort of piece of work. So she'd taken the last 12 months sort of stepping back a little bit. But this period has just set us off again. Again, that's one of the little battles we need to take up on people's behalf, because actually, ironically, of course, ME sufferers are the ones that are probably least able to do the petitioning. Been running a campaign called Missing Millions, which is just highlighting the fact that most of the people who would like to campaign are ill in bed at home and not well, so they're quite often hidden from public space. So while Sarah as well, she wanted to highlight these issues. So from her point of view, she had learned to cope with semi-isolation for a period. So as I say, this isn't particularly new, and we seem to all doing really well as a family, to be honest. We sort of coping well, enjoying having the kids around.
Brilliant.
If anything, it's probably there that have the most uncertainty. I've got my son James should be graduating with a law degree in the summer and not quite sure what's happening, and a daughter wanting to go to university in September, having spent her whole life getting to this point where you should be doing your A levels at the moment, and they're not happening. So there's a lot of uncertainty. 2020 was supposed to be our biggish year. I was retiring, one coming back from university and one going off to university, and it's amazing how quickly those fundamentals and the big picture stuff can be removed, isn't it? And we just have to cope with it in our own way, really, and work our way through it, which I think we have.
Yeah, it sounds like it's been quite a tough period for you as a family, particularly for Sarah and the impact it's had on her, and obviously you guys as a unit having to support her, and I'm sure she really appreciates it. And did you say is it Miles for Millions? Have I got that wrong? Is it
Missing Millions or
Missing Millions? Sorry, I've crossed over two campaigns there. Yeah,
exactly. Now I'll send you some links and things, but there's some quite powerful stuff, and I've just started to do a few more blogs, really just for my friends in the sector, because I think there is a little bit, particularly the physical activity sector and some of the elite sports people that I know, there is always this approach that if you work hard or work through it, everything will be all right. And actually, that isn't always a helpful attitude.
Yeah.
I know we've talked about these things in the past. And so there is a little bit that, physical activity in most conditions is really, really good, but you need to be sensitive, because in some, and I'm working with the Activity Alliance on this, it's one of my people we've been working with, is for some conditions, it isn't the best thing to do. It can be detrimental. And so, like with everything in life, one of the phrases I often say is, if you're certain, then you're almost certainly wrong, because there are subtleties and nuances in almost everything in life. And, making a broad statement like that, there has to be a caveat somewhere. And for ME sufferers, that is the caveat, is that it can be harmful. So don't be pressured into doing sport and physical activity just because everyone's saying it's good for you, because actually it isn't.
Yeah, it's very true. No, thanks for drawing that out. It's a very individual journey for everyone, isn't it?
Yeah.
So during this time, during the coronavirus, during COVID-19, have you got any top tips for people to stay physically active and mentally well as a result?
Yeah, so we've been trying to really support some of the great work that's coming out from some of the people I've just been talking about, this at UK Actives and the Sport England. So they've got some great stuff, and another one launched again yesterday, under this hashtag of stay active. So just trying to find imaginative ways that work for you. It's very difficult for me to sort of double guess what everybody can or can't do. One of the things is really with this is, and going back to that collaborative leadership, is there are 65, 70 million of us. We all need to find things that work for us individually, and recognising, I said before, these inequalities mean that actually if you're stuck in a a tower block in central London, your solution will look very different to mine. With my ability to walk, you know, as soon as I've gone a kilometre, I'm out into the countryside running. So that works for me, but it's trying to find something that works individually for people, and that's not going to be easy for a lot of people. So this latest, I think, is going out on the television yesterday and today, some adverts. It's just trying to find. I saw one where somebody created a skateboard park in their flat, or sort of tennis against the garage wall. You know, all sorts of different ways of just trying to find ways that suit you as an individual for staying as active as possible. And as I say, it's probably not that easy. You know, you do look across society, and if you're in social housing in central London in a very small block with a single parent and children, that is a really, really tough task to find something that works for them. And so we all need, you know, so that normally I'd say is about neighbourliness and trying to, you know, work together and getting people into sort of safe spaces to do that, and hence the importance of green space in as many urban areas as possible. But again, lockdown has made that very difficult. So, you know, look out for other people's ideas, get people to, you know, trying to get a lot of our partners in the Sport for Development Coalition, they're looking out for people and trying to act and reach out to people in a different way. Can't do it physically, but they can do it like this, or by phoning and talking to them. So all I would urge is everyone to look out for everyone else in their neighbourhood to see what they can do to help them to generate some level of physical activity, because as you said before, it does lead to a greater mental well-being as well as physical well-being as a combination.
Exactly. Yeah, you don't need to be an elite athlete to stay physically active, and you do need to find something that helps you within your individual circumstances, whether it's throwing a tennis ball against the wall, or just searching for some exercise groups like Joe Wicks, I know, is doing an exercise session most mornings, and that's quite popular. And so, like you say, it's just finding what works for you. Now,
the 99-year-old can walk 100 times around his back garden.
I can't believe, yeah.
There are excuses, as I said, for people not doing stuff, and there's a whole reason why some people can't, but actually that's an inspiration for those who think, you know, there is a possibility, isn't there?
That's incredible. And he's raised, what, nearly 30 million for the NHS, which is unreal. So, you know, hats off to Captain Tom. Well done. And thank you so much for doing what you're doing. It's appreciated, and your service in the past has been appreciated as well. Thank you. Now, Andy, we're going to wrap this up, and I want you to do a plug for any hashtags, acts, websites you've got. Feel free to. So where can people follow you, and how can they find out about what you're doing, and particularly how can they find out about the stuff to do with ME as well?
Okay, yeah. So the blogs on the ME piece are on our Saje Impact website, which is sajeimpact.com. So they're going up on there. Most of the stuff that I do is probably on my Twitter and Instagram, which is Andy J Reed and then _OBE. For both of those, they're both exactly the same. So most, as you know, if you follow me on Instagram particularly, try to post most stuff, and posted some links today to some of this work. And then the other big piece is around the Sports Think Tank. Google it, sportsthinktank.com. And again, sport_think tank should enable you. And we've got quite a lot of followers and others who we're there as a space for other people to use as a resource. You know, that collaborative leadership piece is really important, is that it's not our views, it's how do we source views from the sector. So always looking for good challenges and for people who've got ideas and innovative approaches to things. So more than happy to hear from people. You can search me on LinkedIn. That's probably another big place where a lot of the postings go and a lot more of the debates that takes place. But yeah, always looking forward to hearing from people and looking forward to engaging in discussions.
Fantastic. Andy, thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And yeah, we'll definitely look to have you on again. It's been very much appreciated.
Pleasure, Ian. And thanks for all the work that you're doing as well. You're doing a fantastic job during this time.
Yeah, thanks. Really kind. I appreciate that. So guys, I want you to stay tuned. We've got a couple more episodes coming up in the series. Thanks for joining us, and I look forward to seeing you soon. Take care.